My name is Paige Afton. I'm 32 years old. 3 days ago, I sat in a lawyer's office, read a single piece of paper, and laughed so hard the attorney put down his pen and asked if I needed a glass of water. My parents hadn't spoken to me in 2 years. Not a birthday card, not a single text. Then their lawyer sent me one document, 1 page. They needed my signature to sell my grandfather's lake house, the only place in the world that ever felt like home. That document was supposed to take something from me. Instead, it handed me the one thing my family never gave me: proof that someone believed I was worth protecting. Before I tell you what was in that letter, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this story. And while you're here, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing where you're listening from. Now, let me take you back to the beginning, to the Christmas dinner that ended everything. I grew up outside Knoxville, Tennessee, in a town where everybody waved at everybody, and your business was never really your own. My father, Gerald Afton, managed the local branch of First Heritage Bank. Respected man, firm handshake, always wore pressed shirts to church on Sundays. My mother, Diane, ran the Women's Bible Study Group and organized the annual Harvest Potluck. Together, they looked like the kind of parents you'd see in a frame at Hobby Lobby. And then there was Meredith, my little sister. 3 years younger and somehow always 3 steps ahead in my parents' eyes. Meredith got piano lessons. I got a maybe next year. Meredith got a used Honda Civic for her 16th birthday. I got a bus pass and a suggestion to ask around about part-time work. Meredith had the bigger bedroom because she needed space to practice. I shared a wall with the laundry room and learned to sleep through the spin cycle. I'm not telling you this for pity. I'm telling you because it matters. My parents never hit me. They never screamed at me. They just allocated me differently, like I was a budget line item they could trim without consequence. My father had a phrase he used whenever I brought it up. He'd set down his fork, look at me like I was being unreasonable, and say, "Meredith needs more help. You're the strong one, Paige. That's what I like about you." I believed him for a long time. I wore strong like a badge. I worked double shifts at the diner through high school, paid for my own prom dress, bought my own textbooks. It took me years to understand that in my father's vocabulary, strong didn't mean admirable. It meant low maintenance. It meant she won't complain. It meant she's not worth the effort. I was the first person in my family to graduate from college. A bachelor's in accounting from the State University, earned while working 25 hours a week at a tax prep office. 4 years, no help, no co-signer on my student loans, just me and an alarm clock set for 5:15 every morning. My parents said they'd come. My mother picked the outfit she'd wear. My father asked what time parking opened. I reserved 4 seats, 2 for them, 1 for Meredith, 1 for my grandfather, Howard Afton, who was the only person who never once made me feel like an afterthought. The morning of graduation, my phone rang at 7. Something came up. My father's voice. "Your sister's moving into her new apartment, and she needs help with the furniture." I stood in my dorm room, holding a pressed blouse and a pair of heels I'd bought on sale. I could hear my mother in the background asking Gerald where the tape gun was. "It's just a ceremony," my mother called out. "You already have the degree, honey." I walked across that stage alone, sat in a row of strangers' families, took my own photo using the timer on my phone, propped against a bench. That afternoon, my phone rang again, but this time it was Grandpa Howard. "I'm proud of you, Paige." His voice was rough around the edges, the way it always got when he was trying not to cry. "And don't worry, I already took care of it." I didn't know what he meant. I figured he was talking about a graduation card. maybe a check tucked inside. I wouldn't understand what Grandpa Howard meant that day for another 7 years. I met Daniel Reeves when I was 26. He was rewiring the office building where I'd just started as a junior accountant. I heard him before I saw him, singing under his breath while tracing a conduit line behind the ceiling tiles. Something by Johnny Cash. Off-key, but committed. Daniel was an electrician, licensed, bonded, and running his own one-man operation out of a second-hand van with his name stenciled on the side. He worked 14-hour days. His hands were calloused and his boots were scuffed, and he brought me wildflowers from a gas station on our third date because he said the florist was closed and he didn't want to show up empty-handed. We got married when I was 28. Small ceremony. Courthouse steps. Grandpa Howard had passed away 3 years earlier, and I still felt the hole he left every time something good happened and I couldn't call him. My parents came to the wedding briefly. At a family dinner the following week, my father sat at the head of the table, looked at Daniel across the roast chicken, and said, with the kind of calm that makes you doubt whether you actually heard it right, "I thought you'd aim higher, Paige. An electrician. That's a downgrade." My mother pressed her lips together. Meredith scrolled her phone. Daniel didn't flinch. On the drive home, he stared ahead at the road and said, "I don't need your dad to respect my job, but I need him to respect you." I wanted to cut contact right then. I almost did. But Grandpa Howard had only been gone 3 years, and something in me kept holding on, some stubborn belief that he'd want me to keep trying, keep showing up, keep being the strong one. So I stayed a little while longer. But before I can tell you what happened at that Christmas dinner, you need to understand one thing about how my family operated. The problem was never what they said out loud. It was what they made you feel, then convinced you'd imagined. It happened at Christmas. 15 people packed into my parents' living room. Aunts, uncles, cousins. The kind of crowd where someone's always refilling the sweet tea and nobody notices when the music changes. Meredith pulled me aside in the kitchen. She needed $5,000. Third time she'd asked. The first 2 loans, her word, not mine, were still unpaid. She said it was for inventory for a boutique she was opening. I said no. Politely. Clearly. She walked back into the living room with wet eyes and a trembling lip. My father stood up from his recliner like he'd been spring-loaded. What kind of sister refuses to help her own family? He said it loud enough for the room to hear. Aunt Linda froze mid-pour over the punch bowl. My cousin Rachel looked at me with wide eyes. "You've changed, Paige," Gerald said, "and not for the better." Then my mother leaned toward my Aunt Carol, close, conspiratorial, and said just loud enough, "She's been like this since she married that man. I honestly think she needs to talk to someone professionally." The room went still. 15 people. Not one opened their mouth. I stood in the center of that room and felt something I hadn't felt since graduation day. Invisible. Surrounded by people and completely alone. I put on my coat, kissed my cousin Rachel's baby on the forehead. Daniel was already at the door, keys in hand, jaw tight. And I walked out of that house for the last time. Silence is a strange thing. You'd think it would feel peaceful. 2 years without the phone calls, the guilt trips, the holiday minefields. 2 years without hearing my mother sigh theatrically or my father explain why Meredith needed more. But silence isn't empty. It's full of the things other people fill it with. Within weeks of that Christmas, my parents had a story, and they told it to everyone. Gerald called relatives. Diane cornered friends at church. The narrative was clean and simple. Paige is mentally unstable. Daniel is isolating her from the family. She needs professional help. My cousin Rachel called me in January. Your mom told me you're seeing a therapist. She said you had some kind of episode at Christmas. Are you okay? I had never told anyone I was seeing a therapist, because I wasn't. My mother fabricated it out of thin air and served it to people who trusted her. It got worse. Gerald called my former boss, a man I'd worked for through college, to check in on me. In a town that small, a call like that isn't concern. It's a grenade with a polite fuse. Rachel told me later that my father described me to relatives as possibly a danger to herself. Those were his words. He weaponized mental health language against his own daughter because she refused to hand over $5,000 and sit quietly while her mother called her defective in front of the family. One by one, the calls stopped. Aunts I used to hear from at Easter, cousins who sent birthday texts. The circle pulled tight around Gerald and Diane like a drawstring, and I was on the outside of it. Daniel and I moved to a town 45 minutes east, close enough to drive back if I ever wanted to, far enough that I didn't have to see my father at the hardware store on Saturdays. I got promoted to senior accountant at a firm that didn't know my family and didn't ask. Daniel's business grew. He hired a second electrician, then a third. We bought a small house with a porch, a backyard, and a kitchen window that caught the morning light. It was a quiet life, a good life. But every Christmas, I catch myself staring at my phone, scrolling through old contacts, hovering over names I couldn't bring myself to delete. No one called, not once. I drove past the lake house once, Grandpa Howard's place out on Cedar Mill Road. The dock was starting to lean. The paint on the shutters had gone gray. I slowed down, but didn't stop. It hurt too much. Everything about that house was him. The smell of cedar, the sound of the screen door, the way he'd always have a chocolate milkshake waiting for me on Fridays when he picked me up from school. I kept driving. 2 years passed like that. Ordinary days stacked on top of each other. I was healing slowly, unevenly, but healing. Then, on a Tuesday in March, an envelope arrived. It had a law firm's return address I'd never seen before, and it was addressed specifically to Paige Afton. That envelope sat on my kitchen counter for 2 days before I opened it. 2 years of silence, and then a letter from a lawyer. If you've ever cut contact with someone in your family and then gotten that unexpected call or letter, you know the feeling. That cold drop in your stomach. If this story is hitting close to home, go ahead and hit subscribe and tell me in the comments. Have you ever gotten a letter that changed everything? I opened it at the kitchen table on a Thursday morning while Daniel was already out on a job. The coffee was still hot. The house was quiet. The letter was from a Mr. Brennan, attorney at law, based in my parents' town. Professional letterhead, clean font, 1 page. It stated that Gerald Afton was initiating the sale of a residential property at 14 Cedar Mill Road, Grandpa Howard's lake house, and that as a potential heir to the estate of Howard Afton, I was being asked to sign a quitclaim deed waiving any claim to the property. There was a signature line at the bottom, a 30-day deadline, and a phone number for Brennan's office. I read it 3 times. 2 years. Not a birthday card. Not a "how are you?" Not even a forwarded chain email. And the first time my family reaches out, it's through a law firm asking me to hand over the last thing Grandpa Howard ever touched. I set the letter down and looked across the kitchen at the small wooden shelf Daniel had built above the stove. On it sat Grandpa Howard's fishing tackle box. Cedar wood, brass hinges, his initials carved into the lid. It still smelled like lake water and linseed oil. Inside that tackle box, tucked against the bottom, was a sealed envelope I'd kept for 7 years. I'd found it when I was clearing out his things after the funeral. Yellowed paper, taped shut, with his handwriting on the front. For Paige, when you need it. I'd never opened it. I thought it was a goodbye letter, something sentimental, something that would make me cry. That night, for the first time in 7 years, I opened Grandpa Howard's envelope. My hands were steady until I tore the seal. Inside were 2 things. The first was a legal document, heavy paper, stamped and notarized. The heading read, Irrevocable Trust Deed, Howard R. Afton Family Trust. Below it, in clean type, the property at 14 Cedar Mill Road, commonly known as the Lake House, was held in irrevocable trust. The trustee was a Mr. Calloway, Grandpa Howard's personal attorney. The sole beneficiary was listed on page 3, Paige Ellen Afton. The second item was a single sheet of notebook paper, folded twice. His handwriting, slanted, deliberate, the way a man writes when his hands are strong, but his patience with pens is limited. Paige, I know your father. He means well, but he doesn't see straight when it comes to your sister. This house is yours. It's always been yours. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Grandpa H. I sat on the bedroom floor with my back against the dresser, and I cried. Not the kind of crying that breaks you apart, the kind that puts something back together. He knew. Before I ever walked out of that Christmas dinner, before I ever met Daniel, before I ever stopped answering my father's calls, Grandpa Howard saw it, all of it. And he didn't just feel sorry for me, he did something about it. That was when I laughed. Not a polite laugh, not an ironic half smile. A real, full-chest laugh. The kind that startles you because you didn't know it was coming. I sat on that bedroom floor with a legal document in one hand and a note in his handwriting in the other, and I laughed until my eyes were wet and the cat jumped off the bed to see what was wrong with me. Because they sent me a letter asking me to sign away a house that was never theirs to sell. The next morning, I called Mr. Calloway. He answered on the second ring. The trust is valid, he said. It's never been challenged, and your father's name doesn't appear anywhere in the documents. He saw me. He always saw me. I called Brennan's office that afternoon. The receptionist had the kind of voice that tells you she's already decided what you're there for. Are you calling to return the signed document, Miss Afton? I'd like to come in, I said. I have some questions about the document before I sign. A pause, keyboard clicking. Mr. Brennan is available Friday at 10. Friday works. I hung up and called Calloway back. I asked him to prepare certified copies of the trust deed, the original filing, the county stamp, the beneficiary schedule, everything. I'll have it ready by Thursday, he said. Then carefully, Miss Afton, do you want me to be present at the meeting? No, but I'd like you available by phone. Understood. I spent the next 5 days doing something I hadn't done in 2 years. I prepared. Not emotionally. I was past that. I prepared the way an accountant prepares for an audit. Documents in order, facts in rows, nothing left to assumption. That was a Monday. By Friday, everything had changed. The night before the meeting, Rachel called. "I need to tell you something," she said. "Your dad's been calling everyone. He's stressed, Paige, like really stressed, about the house, about Meredith's store. It's in serious trouble. She took out business loans. Your dad co-signed all of them." I sat on the porch. The crickets were loud. Daniel was inside washing dishes. Rachel kept going. "8 months ago, your dad refinanced the mortgage on their house on Birchwood and put the money into the boutique. Your mom signed off on it. Now the boutique's tanking, the loans are due, and your dad owes the bank on his personal guarantee. I think it's around $180,000. $180,000. My father, the banker, the responsible one, the man who told me Daniel was a downgrade, had gambled his retirement and his home on Meredith's clothing store. He found a buyer for the lake house, Rachel said. $320,000. Enough to cover the guarantee and keep the boutique going another 6 months. And the only thing standing between him and that sale is your signature. Paige, he told everyone you'd sign. He said, Paige has no use for that house anyway." I stared at the dark tree line beyond our backyard. "Thank you for telling me, Rachel. What are you going to do?" "I'm going to that meeting." Friday came. I set Grandpa Howard's tackle box on the passenger seat, the one that still smelled like cedar and lake water. I tucked the folder of trust documents into my bag. Then I drove 45 minutes back to the town I'd left behind, past the Shell station where Grandpa Howard used to buy me chocolate milkshakes every Friday, past the middle school where I won a spelling bee and nobody from my family was in the audience because Meredith had a dance recital the same night, past the intersection at Oak and 3rd where Grandpa Howard's pickup used to idle, waiting for me with the window down and the radio on. The town hadn't changed. Same brick storefronts on Main Street, same faded mural on the side of the hardware store, same church steeple poking through the trees like a finger pointing upward with conviction. Brennan's office sat on the 2nd floor of a red brick building on Main Street, above a dental practice. The stairwell smelled like old carpet and coffee that had been sitting on a warmer since dawn. And there, sitting at the far end of the conference table in a pressed shirt with his hands folded in front of him, was my father. Gerald looked up when I walked in. Same jaw, same posture, same way of holding a room like he'd already measured it and found it acceptable. "Hello, Paige." His voice was calm, gentle. The concerned father register, pitched just low enough to sound caring, just controlled enough to remind you who's in charge. I stopped 2 steps inside the doorway and looked at Brennan. "I was told this was a meeting between me and your office." Brennan adjusted his tie. "Mr. Afton asked to be present. I thought it might facilitate things." "Facilitate," I repeated. "The way you'd hold up a garment in the wrong size, study it, and set it back on the rack." I sat down across from my father, placed my folder on the table, didn't open it. Gerald leaned forward. "Sit down, sweetheart. Let's get this done quick. I know you're busy." He tilted his head, conciliatory, practiced. "I know things have been difficult, but this isn't about us. This is about the house. Your grandfather would have wanted this." He used Grandpa Howard's name. He sat across from me in a lawyer's conference room, the first time we'd been in the same space in 2 years, and he used the name of the one person who ever stood in my corner to try to move me out of it. That was when I knew this was never going to end unless I ended it. Not with anger, not with a scene, with the truth. Sitting in a manila folder on a conference table, waiting to be read. Gerald shifted into sales mode. Same cadence he used at the bank when explaining loan terms to people who didn't read fine print. The house has been sitting empty for years. No one's using it. I've got a buyer ready to close at 320. Your sister's business needs a bridge loan. This solves the problem clean. Brennan slid a document across the table. Quitclaim deed, bold at the top. My name typed beneath a signature line at the bottom. I picked it up and read it slowly. Every word, every clause. The room was quiet except for my father tapping his index finger against the table, a rhythm he probably didn't know he was making. I set the document down. You haven't asked me how I am. Gerald blinked. What? In 2 years, this is the first contact, and it came through a law firm. I kept my voice flat, not angry, just clear. You didn't call, you didn't write, you sent a lawyer. He shifted in his seat. We've been trying to reach you. My phone number hasn't changed. Brennan cleared his throat. Gerald ignored him. Paige, I'm not here to rehash the past. I'm here to handle a piece of property. That's all. And if I don't sign? The tapping stopped. Gerald's jaw tightened. Then we all wait longer. It costs everyone more money. Don't make this complicated, Paige. Don't make this complicated. The same man who told 15 people I was mentally unwell. The same man who skipped my graduation. The same man who called my husband a downgrade. Don't make this complicated. I leaned back in my chair. Before I do anything, I'd like to understand why I wasn't told about the sale before a lawyer sent me a letter. Gerald turned to Brennan, the way a man turns to a witness stand. We haven't been able to reach her. She cut off the entire family 2 years ago. No explanation. No explanation? I repeated. Diane and I have tried everything. He shook his head slowly, performing sadness with structure. She's been going through a difficult time. His voice dropped a notch. Her husband has been a bit controlling. We worry about her environment. Brennan set his pen down and glanced at me. I could see the question forming behind his eyes. Is this true? I didn't defend myself. I didn't correct the record. I looked at my father, held his gaze, and said, Are you done? Something shifted in his face. The smile didn't disappear. It froze, like a projector catching on a frame. Gerald's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at the screen and held up a finger. 1 second, he answered. The speaker wasn't on, but in a room that quiet, you didn't need it. Meredith's voice came through, sharp, thin, urgent. Did she sign yet? Dad, I need to know by Monday. The landlord's threatening to change the locks. Just tell her it's for the family. She always caves when you say that. Gerald cupped his hand over the phone. I'm handling it. Give me an hour. He ended the call. His neck flushed red from the collar up. Brennan was looking at his legal pad. I folded my hands. She always caves when you say that, I repeated quietly, word for word. Gerald set the phone face down. She's under a lot of pressure. Don't take it. I'm not taking anything, I said. I'm just listening. I looked at Brennan. He still hadn't looked up, but the pen in his hand had stopped moving. This was the negotiation my father had prepared for. Push the paper across the table. Invoke Grandpa Howard's name. Wait for the obedient daughter to sign. Drive home by noon. Instead, he was sitting in a room where his youngest daughter had just confirmed out loud, to a witness, that the whole thing was a performance, a machine. Push the lever. Watch Paige fold. I didn't fold. Gerald stood up. The chair screeched against the floor. Paige, I've been patient. Sign the paper. He pointed at the quitclaim deed like it was a ledger that didn't balance. This house means nothing to you. You haven't been there in years. You're right, I said. I haven't. Because the last time I visited, you told my husband he was a downgrade. Gerald waved his hand. That was a joke. It wasn't funny. 3 words. I let them sit there. Gerald pressed both palms flat on the table. You know what your problem is? You hold grudges. Your mother was right. You need help. Professional help. Brennan raised a hand. Mr. Afton, let's keep this productive. Gerald's eyes were locked on me. If you don't sign this, I will take legal action. I'll file a quiet title motion. A judge will make you sign. I turned to Brennan. Can he do that? Brennan shifted. There are legal avenues, but let's not get ahead of... Okay, I said. Both men stopped. I reached for my bag and pulled the folder onto the table. The room felt like the second before a fuse catches. Before we go any further, I said, I have something I'd like to show you. I watched my father's eyes drop to the folder. He didn't know what was in it. Neither did Brennan. But something in the air changed. The way a room changes when the person who's supposed to be losing stops acting like it. I unclipped the folder, opened it, and set the first page face up on the table. The document slid across the mahogany with the soft hiss of good paper on polished wood. Gerald looked down. The bold header was impossible to miss. Irrevocable Trust Deed. Howard R. Afton Family Trust. This is an irrevocable trust deed, I said. Filed 7 years ago by Howard Afton with the county clerk's office. It names me, Paige Afton, as sole beneficiary of the Lake House property. The trustee is Mr. Calloway, Grandpa Howard's attorney. I pushed the full document, all 8 pages, certified copy, county stamp on the front, to the center of the table. You're welcome to read it. The silence that followed had weight. It pressed against the walls of that conference room like a held breath. Gerald didn't touch the papers. His eyes moved from the document to my face and back again, as though he was waiting for one of them to explain the other. Brennan reached for the trust deed immediately. He turned to the first page, read it, turned to the second, read that too. Then he removed his glasses, pressed the bridge of his nose, and set the document down very carefully, as though it might detonate. He looked at Gerald. I've been in enough meetings, quarterly reviews, tax audits, compliance calls, to recognize the exact moment a professional realizes the ground underneath the conversation has shifted. Brennan's expression didn't change dramatically. He didn't gasp. He didn't curse. He just looked at my father the way a surgeon looks at an X-ray when the break is worse than expected. And Gerald, still standing, still leaning on the table with both hands, finally stopped talking. The look on that lawyer's face, I will never forget it. I spent 2 years wondering if I was crazy for walking away. 2 years hearing secondhand that my own parents told people I was broken. And then I sat in a room and watched the truth land on the table in black and white. If you've ever been doubted by the people who were supposed to believe in you, hit that like button. This one's for you. Brennan set the document down and looked at Gerald. The way a man looks at a client who has just made his job significantly harder. Mr. Afton, he said. The formality in his voice was new. Were you aware that your father established an irrevocable trust for this property? Gerald's mouth opened, closed, opened again. That can't be right. The house was part of his estate. It came to me through probate. Brennan picked up the trust deed again, turned to the filing page, and read the date. According to this document, the property was transferred to the trust 3 years before your father passed away. If this is accurate, and the county filing stamp suggests it is, the lake house would not have passed through probate. It would have been excluded from the estate entirely. Gerald stared. That's impossible. The county clerk's office would have the original on file, Brennan continued, speaking now with the deliberate calm of a man measuring every word for liability. I'd recommend verifying, but this copy appears properly executed and notarized. Gerald turned to me. His face had gone the color of old drywall. Where did you get this? From Grandpa Howard. He would never. Gerald's voice cracked along the seam. He wouldn't go behind my back like this. I held his gaze. He didn't go behind your back, I said. He protected his granddaughter. A pause. There's a difference. The conference room was the quietest place in Tennessee. The clock on the wall ticked. Somewhere outside, a truck downshifted on Main Street. Gerald slowly sat back down. His hands, which had been pointing and commanding and tapping all morning, lay flat on the table. They were shaking. Brennan dialed Calloway on speaker. It rang twice. Calloway's voice came through, measured, unhurried. The voice of a man who'd been expecting this call for 7 years. Brennan identified himself and asked directly, Mr. Calloway, can you confirm the existence and validity of an irrevocable trust established by Howard Afton regarding the property at 14 Cedar Mill Road? I can. I drafted it myself. The trust was executed and filed with the county 7 years ago. Howard Afton funded it with the lake house property during his lifetime. Paige Afton is the sole named beneficiary. The property has never been part of the Howard Afton estate and did not pass through probate. Is the trust currently active and unchallenged? Active and unchallenged. I serve as trustee. Brennan thanked him and ended the call. Then he turned to Gerald with the careful posture of a man delivering news he didn't want to deliver. Mr. Afton, I'm going to have to pause this proceeding. The quitclaim deed I prepared is not applicable. Ms. Afton has no claim to waive because the property was never in your father's estate to begin with. A pause. Mr. Afton, if you've represented to the buyer that you hold clear title to this property, that could create a separate legal issue. Gerald pushed back from the table. You planned this. His voice was tight, strung between accusation and something closer to fear. You've been sitting on this for 7 years, waiting. I didn't plan anything. My voice didn't rise. I didn't even open that envelope until your lawyer sent me a letter. You brought me here, Dad. I hadn't called him that in 2 years. It landed heavier than I expected, for both of us. Gerald pressed the heels of his hands into his eyes. When he pulled them away, I saw something I hadn't prepared for. He looked old, not just tired, diminished, like someone had pulled a thread and the whole pattern was unraveling. Paige, you don't understand. His voice cracked down the center. If I can't sell that house, your sister, the business, I co-signed everything. Your mother and I refinanced the house. We could lose it. Our house. I heard the desperation. I did. And part of me, the part that spent 18 years trying to earn his attention, wanted to reach across the table. But I stayed where I was. You co-signed Meredith's business loan, I said. You refinanced your mortgage for her store. You put everything on the line for her. And in all that time, not once did you call to ask how I was doing. Gerald's mouth opened. Nothing came out. And now you want me to give up the one thing Grandpa Howard left me, so you can fix a problem I wasn't part of creating? He would have wanted us to be a family. He would have wanted you to be a father to both your daughters. The room held its breath. Brennan gathered his legal pad and stood. I think it's best we adjourn. Mr. Afton, I'd recommend consulting with a trust litigation attorney for your options. Miss Afton, you're free to go. I stood, collected the trust documents, placed them back in my folder. The quitclaim deed still sat in the center of the table, unsigned, like a check that bounced. Gerald didn't move. He sat with his hands flat on the table, staring at the grain of the wood as if the answer might be somewhere in the mahogany. Paige, I stopped at the door. Please. One word. Stripped of posture, stripped of strategy. Just a man in a conference room who'd run out of moves. I looked at him. For a second, just a second, I saw the version of him from before. The man who taught me to ride a bike on Cedar Mill Road. Who let me steer the boat even though I always went too far left. Who once, when I was 7, carried me a quarter mile through the rain because I'd lost my shoe in the mud, and he didn't want me walking barefoot. That man existed. He just got buried somewhere under the spreadsheets and the favoritism and the fear of Meredith failing. You know my number, I said. It hasn't changed. I walked through the lobby, past the receptionist, down the stairwell that smelled like old carpet, out the front door. I sat in my car for 5 minutes, engine off, hands on the wheel. I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired. The kind of tired that 2 years of silence doesn't fix. The following week, Calloway sent Brennan's office a formal demand letter. 1 paragraph. It stated that the property at 14 Cedar Mill Road was held in irrevocable trust for Paige Ellen Afton, that no sale could proceed without the trustee's authorization, and that any buyer who had been represented as having access to clear title should be advised accordingly. That letter had consequences. The sale fell apart by the end of the month. The buyer, a developer from Nashville who'd been planning to tear down the lake house and put in vacation rentals, backed out within 72 hours of receiving notice. His agent called Brennan's office and, according to Calloway, the conversation was brief. Without the sale, Gerald's financial position collapsed faster than either of them had calculated. The personal guarantee on Meredith's business loans came due in May. He went back to the bank, his own bank, the branch he'd managed for 22 years, and asked about restructuring. They declined. The restructuring officer, by all accounts, was professional about it. The boutique closed on a Saturday in June. Meredith posted a long statement on social media about taking a break to focus on her wellness. The comment section was supportive. None of the aunts or cousins tagged me. My parents put the house on Birchwood up for sale in July. It was on the market for 11 days before it went under contract. A young couple from Chattanooga bought it. They had a baby and a dog and the kind of energy that makes you want to give them a good deal. Gerald and Diane moved into a rental on the east side of town. 2 bedrooms, ground floor. I didn't know any of this in real time. Rachel told me in pieces. A text here, a phone call there. She was careful the way people are careful when they're standing between 2 fires and trying not to catch. Your mom called me last week, she said, sometime in August. She wanted to know if I'd heard from you. What did you tell her? That I talk to you sometimes, that you seem okay. A pause. She cried, Paige. I don't know what to do with that. You don't have to do anything with it, I said. Rachel was quiet for a moment. She said she's been seeing a counselor. Another pause. I think she means it. I don't know if that matters. I looked out the kitchen window at the yard. Daniel had built a raised garden bed that spring. Tomatoes, peppers, a row of herbs along the fence. The basil had outgrown its container and was leaning toward the sun with the single-minded focus of something that wants to live. It might matter, I said. Eventually. But not yet. In September, my Aunt Linda called me directly. I hadn't heard her voice in 2 years. She apologized inside the first minute, not the performative kind, not the kind that circles around blame and lands on a technicality. She said, "I should have said something at Christmas. I was standing right there and I didn't say a word, and I've been ashamed of it ever since." I accepted it, not because I owed her absolution, but because I could hear that she meant it. There's a difference between an apology and a person trying to uncarry something heavy. Linda was carrying it. We talked for 40 minutes. She told me about her daughter, my cousin Sophie, who was studying nursing in Memphis. She asked about Daniel, about the house, about the firm. She didn't mention Gerald. She didn't mention Meredith. When we hung up, I sat on the porch and felt the strange, unsteady relief of being seen by someone from that world. It didn't fix anything, but it wasn't nothing. By then, something had begun to shift in me. Not toward my parents, not yet. Toward the lake house. In October, I called Callaway. "I'd like to visit the property," I said, "to see what condition it's in." "Of course," he said. "I'll send you the key." The key arrived on a Thursday. Small, brass, on a ring with a single cedar bead. The kind of detail that tells you a man chose it deliberately. I held it for a long time before I put it in my pocket. Daniel offered to come. I told him I wanted to go alone. I drove out on a Saturday morning when the light was still low and the trees were doing the October thing they do in East Tennessee, burning orange and red and a deep amber that makes you forget to be sad about anything. Cedar Mill Road hadn't changed. Same gentle curve at the half-mile mark. Same mailbox shaped like a largemouth bass. Same gap in the trees where the lake appeared suddenly and all at once, like something revealed instead of approached. I parked in the gravel drive and sat with the engine off. The lake house was smaller than I remembered. That happens, I think, when you've been carrying a place inside you. It grows to fill the space you give it, and then you arrive and it's just boards and a tin roof and a dock that leans 12 degrees to the left. But the cedar smell was exactly the same. The moment I opened the car door, it was there. Wood and water and something else underneath, something I could only call him. The key turned on the first try. Inside, dusty but intact. The old tartan blanket still folded over the back of the couch. His bookshelves, hunting journals, a water-warped copy of True Grit, paperback westerns with broken spines. The fishing rods hung in a row along the wall above the wood stove, organized by length, the way he always kept them. On the kitchen table, under a glass paperweight shaped like a fish, was a single handwritten note. I recognized the stationery immediately. The same pale blue notepad I'd seen beside his kitchen phone since I was 7 years old. But the handwriting wasn't his. It was my mother's. I stood in the kitchen for a long time before I picked it up. "Paige, I don't know if you'll ever come here. I left this with the key when I dropped it at Callaway's office. In case. I'm sorry. I know what that doesn't cover. I know it doesn't reach everything. Your grandfather always said you were the one who understood him. I think I was jealous of that. I don't know why it took me this long to say that. I might not be able to say it to your face yet. But I wanted to say it somewhere. The house looks better than we left it. I cleaned it in the spring. I wasn't sure you'd want that, but I didn't know what else to do." I set the note down and looked out the window over the sink, at the dock, at the lake going silver in the mid-morning light. She cleaned it. She had driven out here, alone, and cleaned his house, for me. For a version of reconciliation she didn't know I'd accept. Quietly, without telling anyone. I didn't know what to do with that. I still don't entirely. I walked out to the dock and stood there for a while. The water was cold and very still. A single heron stood at the edge of the shallows across the way, motionless as a thought you can't quite catch. I didn't cry. I thought I would. But what I felt instead was something harder to name, a kind of settling. The way a house does in winter, all its joists and beams, finding the positions they'll hold through the cold. This was mine. He made sure of it. And it was still here. Several weeks later, Gerald called. I let it ring. He didn't leave a voicemail. 2 days after that, a letter arrived, handwritten, on the kind of stationery my father would never normally use. Heavy cream paper. His handwriting careful in a way I'd never seen before, like a man thinking about every word before he wrote it. He didn't ask for anything. He didn't justify anything. He wrote 3 paragraphs. The first said he was sorry for the things he'd said about Daniel. The second said he knew he'd handled the Christmas dinner wrong, and that he'd spent 2 years blaming me for his own failure. The third said he didn't expect a response. He just needed her to know. He signed it Dad, not Gerald, not your father, just Dad. I put the letter in Grandpa Howard's tackle box, underneath the trust documents, next to the note he'd written me 7 years ago. I didn't respond. Not yet. Maybe not for a while. But I didn't throw it away. My name is Paige Afton. I'm 32 years old. I'm sitting on the dock at 14 Cedar Mill Road as I record this. The water is doing the thing it does in late October, going flat and gray in a way that looks cold but doesn't feel it. A heron landed on the opposite bank 20 minutes ago. He's still there, patient in the way birds are patient, which is to say, completely, without strategy. This is where I come now when I need to think, which is a thing I'm still getting used to. Having a place that's mine, that was always mine. People ask me sometimes, not here, but in the real world, at dinner tables and in parking lots, if I regret the no contact, if I wish I'd handled it differently, if I miss them. Here's what I've landed on. I don't regret the silence. It was the first clear thing I'd done in years, and I think I needed to find out who I was when there was no one sitting across from me explaining me to myself. What I learned is that the bravest thing I ever did wasn't walking into that conference room. It was walking out of the Christmas dinner. It was making a quiet life on a road 45 minutes east. It was not answering every call. It was opening a letter from a lawyer and laughing. I laughed because my grandfather, a man who barely raised his voice in 80 years of living, who wore the same fishing vest for 2 decades and thought a good day was a box of chocolate milkshakes and an early morning on the water, had outplayed every single one of us. Quietly, without a word. 12 years before I needed it, he looked at his family and thought, she's going to need this one day. That's love. Not the loud kind. The kind that makes plans. I haven't decided what happens next with my parents. I don't think that's a decision I need to make today. My mother cleaned a house she didn't have to clean. My father wrote a letter he didn't have to write. Both of those things are true at the same time as everything else that happened. I'm learning to hold that. Here's my question for you today. Not about family drama, not about who was right or wrong. Just this. Has anyone ever done something quietly for you? Something you didn't know about until much later? That changed the way you understood your own story? Tell me in the comments. I read everything. If you've made it to the dock with me, thank you. Genuinely. This is not a story I would have told a year ago. I'm telling it now because I think a lot of you are in the middle of your own silences, your own envelopes, your own moments of trying to figure out what you're owed and what you're willing to hold on to. If this helped even a little, subscribe. Come back. I'll be here. The heron just left. He didn't say goodbye. He just spread his wings and was gone.